Moving to live for folks who are with us. Boom, we are on there. All right, people, if you're with us live, welcome. If you're watching later, hello, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whenever you're tuning in. Thanks for being here. If this is your first session, great. If you've seen the past ones, even better. Check them out if you haven't. Today I have Mo and Amina. So first, let me both say welcome and thank you both for being here. Just, you mind just saying just your name and how you are feeling today. How are you really feeling today? Mo?
Sure, I'll start off. Hi, everyone. I'm Mo Yusuf Morales, and I'm here. We finished a tough school year, and we're at tonight's graduation. So I'm feeling a sense of relief. I'm also feeling a little bit exhausted, tired. This school year was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amina Mohammed, and I work with Mo. And very similar to you, Mo, I feel a huge sense of relief. I left work yesterday feeling very tired, and I was wondering why I felt tired until I reflected back on the whole school year. But yes, I'm feeling a huge sense of relief for being done.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for making the time. Despite all of those things, how you're feeling is how I hear and how we hear everybody has felt this year and is feeling. So happy that a little bit of break and calm is coming. I'm feeling a little tired and, it's kind of break, but also time for the conference. So I'm starting to speed up for that, but also it's a little bit sunny over here too. So I appreciate a little sunshine and warmth. And I'll take that compared to rain and cold. So let's get to know who you both are. Okay, so got your names, yes. So tell me, what kind of work do you do and why? Why do you do it, even when it's hard? Why don't you start, Amina? What are you doing and why?
So my official title is Diversity and Equity Coordinator, and this is my first year actually doing this work. My background is in early childhood education. So I was a first grade teacher, a third grade teacher, an English language learner teacher for K through 5. And this is my first year outside of the classroom. And it's interesting you asked that question because right before this, I was telling Mo that I still don't have the words to explain to my parents what exactly I do. I just tell them that I'm an administrator. But essentially my work in schools to work with equity programming with middle school students and work with teachers to rethink their curriculum, to make it more inclusive, to make it, or to have the foundation be anti-bias, anti-racist. Yeah, I honestly still don't have the words to describe my job outside of working with students with programming and also working with teachers in said programming.
And why? Why do you do it?
I do this work because, on a very foundational level, I love children and specifically Black children. I'm a Black woman. I'm an aunt to several nieces and nephews. And so there's a very special place in my heart for Black children and all children, but very specifically Black children. And so I do this work to make sure that children have spaces in schools where they feel seen, where they feel safe, and where they feel heard.
Beautiful. Mo?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I am a school leader. I am a division head for a middle school here in Brooklyn, and I work with Amina, and I run grades 6, 7, and 8. I've been a middle school educator for about 20 years so far in my career. I love the age group. I think I'm addicted to the drama in a good way. And they give me a lot of life, our young people. And so, my simple answer for why, and equity work has always been a part of what I saw in working in schools when I was a classroom teacher, when I when I knew I was going to open my own school. I had founded a school before I came to my current role. I knew that was always going to be part of it and this is why I do the work, because it's what I wanted in my own life growing up. It's what I wish I had had. It's what I wish my siblings had had. It's what I think about when I see my parents in survival mode their entire lifetime. And when they came to this country, we immigrated here from Bangladesh in the early 80s. And it's what I want for my children too, and for all of yours. I I just think about the spaces that are made for us, and the ones that aren't, and the ones that we occupy, and the ones that we can make for us. And so that brings me to this work.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. So now as we think about, as we're finishing the year, I'm curious to know what's your reflections, both your reflections on how have the last 2 years been, 2 to 3 years, 2.5 years. What has pandemic education been like as you look at it now? If you were describing this period to somebody, right? At some point we'll talk to some people who didn't experience this in the same kind of way, and I'll ask you, what were these 2 and 3 years like to be an educator? The good, the bad. What's your reflections on pandemic schooling? Mo first, and then Amina.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's not over. I'll say that. We're still in it, people. And so I think that's been one big realization, that we went into something, and if you think back to that, whatever that week was for you, your school shut down, your school community, you got this email from your superintendent, whoever it was, and you're thinking, okay, we're gonna be back in a week, and 2 weeks, and 3 weeks. And I think that is one of the biggest things it's been for me. It has been a shift, and a long-term shift, in terms of what schooling was. And I think through this experience, one misconception that I've seen is it's going to go back to what it was. And we just need to get through this time, and we're going to get back to what it was. And something that I realized is what it was not healthy to begin with. And I think we knew that. And what we have had through all of this, albeit it's been a painful and harmful opportunity in many ways, but it's also given us an opportunity to rethink, to step back, to reimagine schools, to unpack, and to get really introspective. And I think that is an opportunity that I can't really imagine another set of circumstances would have given us. So I will say that is the silver lining of all of this. And I also think in particular, it's made me think about the concepts of accessibility. There's so many ways in which we've made school more accessible. There's so many ways we've thought about how we connect with families, how we connect with children, how we connect with each other in the classroom as administrators and teachers that weren't there before COVID. And now that, mask mandates have lifted and schools are trying to be back in person again, it has pushed me to think as an educator around what accessibility looks like now that we know how to do those things, now that we saw how it could be. So those are some of the things that I think about. And I have a lot more to say, but I'm curious to hear what Amina has to say.
Yeah, I mean, just taking and bouncing off what you were saying, Mo, I think the last 2 years for me have been very challenging. I think specifically thinking about like the lives that we've lost, and people's lives just like drastically shifting in so many different ways, whether positively or negatively. And I think for me, it's highlighted the gaps between those who have and those who haven't. Because for me in the pandemic, I made the shift from teaching at a charter school for a few years to going into an independent school. And like, I really got to see the difference in schooling between schools that are funded and schools that are underfunded, and what that looks like specifically in a pandemic, which like just highlighted that so much more. So I have to be very honest in saying it's been a very painful experience. And I still am sitting in a lot of those feelings. And also at the same time, because of that, it's pushed me to think, to your point, Mo, to reimagine what education can look like, to innovate, to think of children holistically, like who is a child, how can we make their schooling experience be great despite this pandemic, despite all these other things that they are going through, how do we make school a fun place to be? And I think for me, this pandemic has also highlighted that many things that we were doing before just weren't working, and we cannot go back to that. Like I am now very strongly committed to not going back to a lot of the practices that I was doing pre-pandemic. And so it's given me a chance to innovate. It's given me a chance to your point, Mo, think of accessibility, think of students who already weren't having a great experience, how we can have them have a much better experience in schools right now. and like pushing other people around me to think the same, because I feel like right now there's such a shift, and like I hate the phrase of like going back to normal, and it's like this is now our new normal, and like because this is now our new normal, what do we do with our new normal? And I don't like the word normal at all, but like just using the language that I've heard, and like reimagining our new normal as well. And so I have a bucket of so many emotions about what the last 2 years have been.
Mhm. Well, let's build on that a little bit, Amina. So when you think about this being the new normal, what's one thing that was a good change that happened that's still sticking around that you want to that we need to keep around, right? So there's things that we had to do during distance and we did them, and maybe was there anything that continued when we came back that ended up being good and that you hope that we keep in our system longer?
Honestly, virtual programming. I didn't think I didn't consider just how wonderful virtual programming is. Not just on some like, you know what, it's convenient and I get to be in my home, but just thinking about people's lives, their schedules and all of that, and how accessible it is, and like the different things that you can do within I love virtual programming, and I would love that to stay and continue and that be part of our new normal.
Can I add something to that? Sort of along those lines, something very practical in the classroom that I've been thinking about, like how do we bring this back, is I think that there was such an opportunity with like when many classrooms were on Zoom for children to have these parallel conversations. The chat became a place where kids would have these conversations, like metacognitive space. They were thinking about thinking, they were talking, there was a parallel conversation there, and then there would be the conversation that we'd be having on the video screen too. And I found that to be really fascinating, and that changed my practice. And I've been thinking about like, how do we bring that to the classroom? So many more children's voices. There was a way that you could ask a question as a teacher or a student in your class can ask a question and everyone could respond, and you could see all the responses virtually at the same time. And there's something about when we're in person, even when we're sitting in a circle in the classroom, we can't exactly do that. And nor do we always hear from every voice in the same way, because there is so much more pressure for kids when it's out loud. Then, you know, they have this opportunity to kind of like write and then delete and go back and or hear where the conversation is going. And so I've been thinking about like, how do I bring that practice back into the physical classroom? This idea that we can have this collective conversation on a couple of different ways and different levels. I'm playing around with that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what if we just bring back passing notes around class back? You know,
I was just thinking about that as I was speaking.
My favorite go-to tool.
Private chat, you know, so
yeah,
you know, or you know, writing on the desk or writing on the walls, right? I mean, that's the equivalent, right, of the chat and the direct message, you know.
Yeah, we do a lot of that. My go-to tool for the last 20 years, Post-its. Don't give it away. It's my secret. Yeah.
Cool. So as we shift gears to thinking about the conference, I know you all have been doing some work around student affinity space. Maybe that's racial affinity, maybe that's different affinities as well. What are you curious about? And also, what are you thinking about as you prepare for this workshop during the conference this summer? What's it going to be about? What kind of questions do you want educators to think about as they're thinking about student affinity space?
Well, we've been thinking about this a lot. You want to start off, Amina, and I'll jump in?
Go ahead. You just started, so I'll let you.
Okay. Let me. I mean, we want. Well, I'm curious to see who comes and why they come. I am really curious about that. What brings us to this space? And one of the things I am interested in exploring is the ways in which this work may be new to schools, but it really isn't also. I think there is this idea that affinity spaces for students is something that would be that can feel uncomfortable or unheard of, but schools are affinity spaces in and of themselves. There's so many parts of that. When we track kids, that in some sense can be an affinity space. When we, clubs, teams, even classes, right, are age-based affinity spaces a lot of times. If you're in a specific grade and that there's a cutoff for that grade, you have to be born within, this 12-month calendar. So I think that I'm really curious about like exploring this idea more. Why is it that when we think about affinity spaces, particularly racial affinity spaces, that there is a tension and a discomfort when really schools have always been places that bring a particular age group or population together based on skills or interests or identities.
Mhm.
Very similar. I am a storyteller and I love to hear what brings people to any space. And so my overarching question is going to be like, why are you here and what brings you here? And as I specifically think about affinity spaces, I'm also curious to hear what other people's experiences have been with affinity spaces across different age groups, different settings, because this is my first time formally, very formally doing it with middle school age students. And I'm curious to hear from folks who have done it with like younger kids or kids at the high school, at the college level with faculty, but just hearing what different stories people have and different experiences that they have with affinity spaces and being able to like connect all of that together.
What's a what's a misconception that you think people have about affinity spaces, or one common problem that maybe you saw or you heard about that you hope people don't do this one thing? What's one thing that you hope folks don't do as they try to create affinity space for students?
I know one misconception I heard is that it's modern day segregation. Like that comes up quite a bit, is like we're segregating students. And I think specifically like Mo, you were just talking about classrooms or affinity spaces. When we track data, when we think about like sports teams, those are all affinity spaces because you're coming together. And essentially that's what an affinity space is. You're coming together because there's something about your experiences that you have in common. But the issue comes up when we have affinity spaces that are based on identity, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's anything that has to do with identity. That's when the comment of like it's segregation and like it's going to cause more harm than good, and that's come up quite a bit in the work that we do. And so yeah.
And I'll say one just one nugget or something that I've learned along the way in doing this work is listen to, if you're going to implement and run student affinity spaces, listen to children. What are they asking for? What are they saying that they need? And it's really easy for us in our own, sort of like where we are in our own racial identity journeys, as an example, to sort of kind of want to bring kids to where we are right now. And I think that is really hard. And it can be, we just really need to be mindful of that piece. So one lesson we've learned along the way is we've just asked ourselves, how can we be less paternalistic about this? How can we center it around student voices? What are we seeing that they need? What are they telling us? And sometimes what are they telling us without telling us?
Mm-hmm. Appreciate it. So as we also get ready for the summer, and it's a time for rejuvenation, right? Replenishing, resting, recovering. What are some of your go-to activities, texts, music, locations that feed your soul, that replenish you, right? Is that a book that you're looking forward to coming back to, a new book that you want to read? Is there some music you've been listening to? What refills your cup to do this work?
I've gotten back into reading. I've noticed that during the school year, it's very difficult for me to read, and I disassociate a lot. So when I come back from work, I don't want to think about anything having to do with anything that I work. Mo knows this about me. So I love to watch reality TV shows, and I will continue watching reality TV shows through the summer. But now I also have the capacity to be able to read for pleasure. And so I'm looking forward to reading a lot of historical fiction, specifically historical fiction around immigration. I'm reading a book right now called A People's History of Heaven. And it's a story about women in a fictional city in India called Heaven, and they come from like a wide range of identities. And I know for a fact that during the school year, there's no way I would have been able to read this because too close to home to the work that we do. And so I'm looking forward to being able to read for pleasure, and being in the sun. I miss the sun. I miss the warm weather. So I look forward to being in the sun, being in the warm weather, exploring museums, lots of things that I just wasn't able to do during the school year because of time and also weather.
I think about that all the time, just like how those of us who work in schools, just like we're basically like all the things of the self-care things come in this 2-month period and we got to pack it all in and then we're back to just depriving ourselves. And I'm, I don't know, I have no answers there. I'm just only like small, little tiny practices day by day that I'm trying to get better at in terms of just not feeling so much like deprivation and then like oversaturation. But it's something that brings me a lot of healing is spending time by water. I'm from a coastal country. I was born in Bangladesh. I immigrated to the United States with my parents when I was very young. And I think about like being near the ocean, listening to the ocean, having my feet in sand, in the earth. There is something very connected there for me. And that is important to me. A book that I haven't started reading yet, but I'm all about like seeing what are the young people reading these days and where are they at and what are they thinking about. And so recently a number of students at our school had a marathon. They asked to have a marathon around a new series called Heartstopper. And I started watching. I got COVID a couple of weeks ago. I'm all right. I'm making it through. Thank you, everybody. I had an opportunity. The one good thing is I had an opportunity to binge watch Heartstopper. And it's so much about, it is about a group of young people, particularly thinking about the intersection of their identities around gender, around race, around sexuality, and sexual orientation. And it was powerful to just see it in that way. It felt very connected to the everyday work of schools and the importance of expansive and inclusivity within our schools, within our models, within who's in our classroom and what we're talking about with kids. And it's all based on a series of graphic novels. So I am going to jump into reading those too. And our students, I was just telling Amina, made a summer reading list, and it's so lovely, and that's top of their list. So I'll be using their list.
I have a funny story about graphic novels. When I taught third grade my first year, a student shamed me for not reading graphic novels. And since then, every summer, fun fact, I read one graphic novel just to like expand my my horizons, because I stick to like one genre. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was publicly shamed in the classroom once. And since then, every summer I read one graphic novel. So I will check that out.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, once upon a time, we called them comic books, and that was okay. You know what I mean? And they were nerdy, and you were in a special insider club if you read comics. And I like that they've stepped up a notch to be called graphic novels. But comics are okay. I'm glad they're cool. Yes, I always love kids telling us what is cool, so that shakes us out of like whatever we're used to, and reminds us that they're living in a time now where that's their reality, right? Our reality of how many ever years ago it was when we were in school, it's a different time. So nothing like that giving us the purpose, but also pushing us to like keep learning and change our reference points. So I appreciate those examples. I'm not at the graphic novel or Heartstoppers yet. My kids are still reading Peppa Pig and Daniel Tiger. So that's what's hip in my home right now. But those all sound great. Let me shift gears 10, 20 years in the future. Okay, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction. Okay, so you can either predict a fear that you have of where things might be in 10 or 20 years, or a dream, okay, that you have of where things might be in 10 or 20 years in education. Okay, pick any direction you want to go. You can do both if you like to. So what's a fear that you have, or what's a hope that you have of where we might be?
I need a little think time on this one.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I think for me, the fear is coming before the hope. Like I have a scroll of fears that I can list, but I'm challenging myself to also think about a dream.
I do have a dream of a just like a flipped classroom. Just really thinking about what it could look like for us to let go of what a traditional classroom looks like and who's in the front or whatever, them there being a front of that classroom, and leaning into what it might be to have a differentiated space where children are moving at their own pace, connecting to each other around broader themes as opposed to specific learning or content goals, and thinking about and really like leaning into bigger collaborative project-based learning pieces that are centered around something that they come up with together. More about the journey, less about the destination. And so that is a dream that I have, and schools are doing it. They're, it's not like there are no schools doing this work, and I know this is a shift that we are starting to see and feel a little bit, and I hope we lean into that. So that is a hope of mine, a dream.
Can I jump in that?
Yeah.
I think I want that exactly what you described, Mo, because we know that schools are doing it, but it's very specific schools that are doing it. And I want that for all children. I don't specifically want that for children with parents who have access to wealth and access to resources and access to time. I want that for all children, to be able to go to school and to have their journey and the process honored, as opposed to the product and the end destination, the goal, the grade, the reading level, and all of that, where a kid just gets to go to school and gets to learn for fun. And we get to honor that journey where they're learning for fun. This is not me saying like, willy-nilly, like kids just go and do whatever they want. There's definitely a fine line there, but just honoring each child's journey without being punitive, without punishing them, without being alarmist about like, your future and like you're gonna fail, and tying their worthiness to their productivity in school. So I dream of that for all children.
Beautiful. Well, we're on the road towards that. Like you said, Mo, it is happening in places, but yes, who gets to experience these dreams and how often in their day? And is it just that one teacher's classroom, or is it all day? Is it all K-12? I'm hopeful of those things. That's why we're in this work. That's why we're trying to create space for folks to come together with other folks to think about this work and push ourselves so that we are working towards those hopes and not the fear, right? And not the programming that it isn't working. So appreciative that you all are doing work all the way on the other coast, right? And there's people out there. We just got to connect our people. So if folks want to stay connected with either of you two, what's your mode of communication? Whether folks are following you, are you doing any writing? Are you offering anything? Are you just an email away? Amina, how can folks stay in touch with you? And is there anything you want folks to know about that is coming up?
Yes, I can give you my work email. I think email is the best way to reach me. So it's the first letter of my name, so A, and then my last name, Mohammed, Mohamed, at stnny.org. That's the quickest and best way to reach me.
Mo?
Yeah, I mean, I am, I'm on Instagram. I mainly just write and sort of share about my musings in life as a brown immigrant parent, as a middle school educator and an enthusiast. And my handle is at Mobsessed. So M-O, it's like M and then the word obsessed. Okay, put it together. It's just some of my musings about what I've learned along the way.
Beautiful, Beautiful. Well, thanks for sharing those. For folks who are listening, if you're catching just as part of it, both Mo and Amina and their colleague, what's your colleague's name that will be joining you?
It's just two of us.
Oh, okay. Well, Mo and Amina will be facilitating a workshop this summer about student affinity space. Make sure you check it out. It's happening the week of June 20th. You can find more information at our website and reach out to them by email. And specifically, if you're curious about affinity space for students, they got plenty of ideas. I appreciate you two for making time, telling your stories, doing the work, and being there for the young people who need to see us doing the work and all the other kids who benefit from us being where we are. So appreciate your work. Thanks for making
Thank
the time.
you. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for hosting. Looking
Mhm.
forward to the conference.
Likewise.
No
Thank
doubt.
you.